This is the BBC giving us an update on what's going on in Iran. Good morning, good morning.
Well, I think if we refused the ability to support the kinds of defensive action that could prevent ballistic missile strikes on hotels in Dubai, for example, I just don't think that would be the right thing to do right
And
now.
this is
We have seen the hotel in
BBC
Dubai, that was
News.
hit, where we have seen attacks on airports across the region. We've seen civilian areas being hit and being affected, and when we have so many British citizens there. So being able to take that preventative action, I think, to make sure that you can do everything possible.
Well, she's trying to maintain the distinction between offensive action, which the government insists that it has not taken any part in and will not take any part in. In other words, military action aimed at destroying the regime in Tehran, and defensive action to maintain the security of British interests and British citizens. But of course, there is a risk here potentially of a mission creep that actually once US approval has been given for the US to use these two bases to attack some Iranian sites, does this inevitably perhaps open the door to further action later on? Now, the government insists that is not the case, and it has produced legal justifications for the position that it currently has. But this is one of many considerations now that is gripping Whitehall. There is where this militarily goes. There is protecting the security of British citizens in the region, and there is certainly a lot of talk about potential evacuation plans for all those people who are currently stranded, some of whom are sheltering in place in the Gulf area. Concerns too, inevitably, about the potential economic fallout from this crisis. It's likely, not inevitable, but that we'll get some statement from the government in the House of Commons later. And as I said, Normia, we're likely to hear a really broad range of political opinion about this. We've already heard, for instance, the Green Party call this an unprovoked illegal attack from America and Israel. It's totally opposed to what is happening. The Liberal Democrats saying there needs to be a vote in Parliament to allow the US to use these British bases. On the other hand, you've got the Conservatives and Reform UK who've argued that the UK should have been in there right at the beginning as part of this US-Israeli action. So this is absolutely a live and divisive issue in politics this morning.
Good to talk to you, Ben. Thank you. That's our political correspondent, Ben Wright at Westminster. Let's bring you more on another developing story in the region. Authorities in Kuwait say several US warplanes have crashed near the country's border with Iraq. In the past few minutes, US Central Command says that F-15 jets went down over Kuwait due to what they call an apparent friendly fire incident. Here's more of that Central Command statement. 3 US F-15E Strike Eagles flying in support of Operation Epic Fury went down over Kuwait due to an apparent friendly fire incident during active combat that included attacks from Iranian aircraft, ballistic missiles, and drones. The US Air Force fighter jets were mistakenly shot down by Kuwaiti air defenses. All 6 aircrew ejected safely, have been safely recovered, and are in stable condition. Kuwait has acknowledged this incident. It goes on to say in the statement that I'm reading to you, we are grateful for the efforts of the Kuwaiti Defense Forces and their support in this ongoing operation. The cause of the incident is under investigation. Let's show you that footage that has been shared on social media, which appears to show that fighter jet crashing to the ground. BBC Verify has confirmed the location of this video, said to show an F-15 crashing near Kuwait City. It was filmed from the west of Kuwait City on the edge of the Al Jarrah area, and that video has been checked for recency and run through 2 AI video detection tools. Now, meanwhile, Israel is carrying out an air assault against the Iran-backed militia group Hezbollah in Lebanon in retaliation to earlier strikes targeting northern Israel. We've seen images of huge plumes of smoke rising following a blast in southern Beirut. 31 people have reportedly been killed, and Israel says it has precisely struck a senior Hezbollah member in Beirut. This comes after the militia group fired missiles at Israel to avenge the killing of Iran's supreme leader. In Lebanon, authorities have ordered the arrest of people who launched the rockets and their instigators. Israeli forces have issued evacuation orders for more than 50 towns and villages across Lebanon. My colleague Lina Sinjab is following developments from Beirut.
Well, perhaps you can hear the sound of the drones roving over Beirut, and possibly one of them hit the target just a short while ago. This is a situation that is really causing a lot of anger among many Lebanese, but I have to say it's mainly among the community surrounding Hezbollah, because their areas, their homes, their towns are again target of these attacks in response to Hezbollah's retaliation for the killing of Iran's supreme leader Khamenei. Now they fled their areas again with nowhere to go but heading back to school shelters or in the streets until they figure out where to stay. They don't know how long this is going to take. The government is really pressing to de-escalate and to condemn.
What the hell did they fire on Lebanon? Lebanon ain't even did shit.
Basically crippled all the efforts of negotiations and talks that were taking place over the past month. Many people feel that Hezbollah has committed a treason, that they dragged the country and the people into an unnecessary war, especially that it's 18 months ago the country has paid a high price. The remnants of the war 18 months ago are still there. The towns and the cities that are destroyed haven't been rebuilt, and now they are under attack again. The worry is that Israel is adamant this time that it's going to attack fiercely. They've already announced that they've killed a high official in Hezbollah. We believe it is a parliamentarian, Mohammed Raad, but they also put the leader of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, as a target. So they're going this time like full-fledged to eliminate Hezbollah. And the government, the people, they've been saying it out loud over and over again that Hezbollah should turn to be a political party and disarm, and the government should be represented by its own official army only that will guard the country. But now we've entered a phase that it's hard to tell where we're going, what's going to happen tomorrow. We know that the war on Iran is going to last for 4 to 5 weeks. That's according to the US President Donald Trump. But we're not sure how Lebanon is going to be dragged into this. It is believed that that was a one-time attack by Hezbollah, but the retaliation, the reaction from the Israeli could take longer. Earlier last week, the Israelis said if Hezbollah got involved in this war, they will respond fiercely, and probably they will also hit the Lebanese airport. This is a country that is crippled with its economy even before the war, and now 18 months ago it was further damaged with the war, and now there are real concerns and worries on where to head next and what's going to happen in this volatile situation.
With me now is Hesham Shoish, who works on the Middle East desk for BBC Monitoring. Good to have you with us. Why is Hezbollah got involved now?
So Hezbollah intervened last night with a salvo of rockets and drones aimed at what they said were military targets just south of Haifa in Israel in response to the assassination of Ali Khamenei, and they also accused Israel of frequent ceasefire violations since November 2024. The group has said that Israel's continued attacks and the assassination of its leaders give it the right to defend itself and to respond at the appropriate time and place. There was this perception in Lebanon that Hezbollah would not intervene in the current round of conflict between the US, Israel and Iran. There was a sense that it would be gearing up for the parliamentary elections scheduled for May in Lebanon. So it was focusing on its social welfare programs, reconstruction, and moving in a more political direction. But the group did nevertheless launch those attacks. So there's been a lot of disappointment, a sense of a lot of work has been undone by the Lebanese government. So we've seen some quite strong reaction from them. We know that the head of Hezbollah's parliamentary group, Mohammed Raad, has been killed, and Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, has said that Naim Qassem, the head of Hezbollah, is also now marked for elimination. So Hezbollah will start to feel very heavily cornered right now, and we may see further escalation from the group.
I just want to read here that the Lebanese state is demanding Hezbollah hands over its weapons. That's coming from the Prime Minister, who's just talking there about the reaction from the Lebanese government. What about Iran's other allied groups, other proxies in the region? Give me a sense of how they're reacting to the Ayatollah's assassination and the whole conflict.
Sure. So the other groups around the region include Yemen's Houthis. We've got numerous Palestinian factions like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and we've got numerous Iraqi groups. So Yemen's Houthis, who were very active in the attacks against Israel and Red Sea shipping after October 2023, have vowed solidarity with Iran. They released numerous strong statements since Saturday. However, they've stopped short of calling for a resumption in those attacks on maritime interests. The Houthis, like Hezbollah, have been significantly downgraded militarily since those Israeli strikes over the course of 18 months. So they've been calling for things like million-man marches across Sana'a and other provinces, but no clues as to any intervention as of yet. The two main Palestinian factions, Hamas and PIJ, have also issued strongly worded statements, but there's no clue on any intervention. But we might see their stance shift over the next few days, because there are things happening on the ground in Israel and the Palestinian territories, like the closure of the Rafah border crossing in Gaza, and also the closure of the Old City in Jerusalem and its holy sites to non-residents. So that might up the ante, it might increase pressure on them to intervene. And then lastly, we've got the Iraqi groups. Those are the ones to watch. They're assessed to be in a much stronger position militarily. They're a lot more organized, they're greater in number, and they've also got access to advanced weaponry and support from the Baghdad government. So far they've said that they've launched drone attacks against US bases. One of those militias, the IRI, or the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, has claimed a total of 23 operations since yesterday on US bases in Iraq and the region. And other militias, including Kataib Hezbollah and the Al-Nujabat movement, have announced that they would expand military operations beyond Iraq.
Good to talk to you. Thank you so much, Hesham. That's Hesham Showish, who works on the Middle East desk for BBC Monitoring. We will keep you across all the latest developments around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News. Israel is carrying out an air assault against the Iran-backed militia group Hezbollah in Lebanon in retaliation to earlier strikes targeting northern Israel. In the last hour, there have been huge plumes of smoke rising following a blast in southern Beirut. The Israel Defense Forces says it has precisely struck a senior Hezbollah member in Beirut. This comes after the militia group fired missiles at Israel to avenge the killing of Iran's supreme leader. In Lebanon, authorities have ordered the arrest of people who launched the rockets and their instigators. Israeli forces have issued evacuation orders for more than 50 towns and villages across Lebanon. Lines of traffic have formed in Beirut as people have been attempting to leave the city since the early hours of this morning. Now, I just want to bring you some breaking news. This is coming from the Cyprus government. It says 2 unmanned drones heading towards UK's Akrotiri airbase in Cyprus were intercepted. That's just coming in from the Cyprus government. Now, this growing regional conflict has entered its third day, with all sides launching large-scale airstrikes. Iran's ambassador to the International Atomic Energy Agency says the Natanz nuclear site was hit on Sunday. Meanwhile, we see reports of blasts in other parts of the Middle East, including Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, Doha, and Dubai. Sirens and explosions have also been heard in Jerusalem. This comes a day after Iranian missiles struck the Israeli city of Beit Shemesh, killing at least 9 people. Now, speaking late on Sunday, the US President Donald Trump said combat operations against Iran would continue until all our objectives were achieved. He warned there would likely be more American casualties after the Pentagon confirmed that 3 US service members had been killed in action. And I just want also bring another line to you because Iranian state media has given an update on the death toll in Iran. They are citing numbers by the Iranian Red Crescent and say over 550 people have now been killed across 130 cities since that first wave of strikes on Iran over the weekend. More on that as we get it. Let's speak now to Seema Shine, who's a senior researcher and the former director of Iran and the Shia Axis research program, the Institute for National Security Studies. She served in the Israeli intelligence community for most of her career, was part of the Mossad between 2003 and 2007. Thank you for joining us on BBC News, Seema. Can I just get from you your sense of what is Israel's aim? What is the end game here?
Well, I think there are two end games. One is might be dependent on Israel and the U.S., and that is to make sure that we don't have Iran doesn't have a nuclear program and doesn't have a breakout capability on the nuclear issue. And the other one is the ballistic missiles, which are, as we see now in the war, quite harmful, killing people everywhere in Israel, in the south, in the north, and in Tel Aviv as well. This is the ultimate goal on the military side, I would say. And the other goal, the hidden one, I would say, which is also but doesn't depend on Israel, is the issue of the regime. What kind of a regime will be in Iran after this war?
Would Israel want regime change?
Pardon?
Would Israel want regime change?
I think Israel would love to see a regime change for a better regime. That doesn't mean that Israel knows how to do it or thinks that it can do it. And actually, I think it was also said by President Trump that the people of Iran that have already demonstrated on the streets in Iran, all over Iran, shouting against the system and against the leader, will go out and make the final job.
You talked there about the nuclear threat. What was the evidence of an imminent threat by Iran?
No, there was no evidence of an imminent threat, no question, because there was the war in June, as you remember, and most of the three main facilities were hit, and therefore it wasn't an imminent threat. But Iran has still a lot of enriched uranium. They can, if they get to the enriched uranium, they can, in a very short time, have enriched it to a military level and make a bomb. So that it wasn't something.
There is conflict there, though. You do get some who are saying that there was an imminent threat, and I wonder, with killing the supreme leader, how does that square? How does all of that square with international law?
You see, this war is after 2 years or more than 2 years of war in the Middle East that started in vis-a-vis Israel, started on the 7th of October. Without Iran, nothing in this region would happen. Iran was facilitating, was supporting, was equipping, was training everything. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq, everything that we saw in the last 2.5 years is because of Iran and was planned by Iran. It's not only that they equipped them and they trained them and they supported them financially. It's also that it was the plan of Iran to attack Israel from all sides of the borders and to make sure that...
But I guess, Seema, what I'm just saying is the targeted assassination of a head of state is virtually unprecedented. What legal, moral framework justifies that? Yes, I take the point that the Ayatollah was hated by many, but legally and morally, what is the framework that justifies that targeted assassination?
Legally, I don't know because I'm not a lawyer in my expertise, but I can tell you that I think that the head of, sometimes in history, and we have examples in history, a leader that was removed could change history. And I think in this case, the leader was the main decision maker in Iran, the only decision maker in Iran, and he was the one who was saying that Israel will be annihilated. There are many cases in the past that he had been saying not only that Israel will be annihilated, but also when it will happen. And he gave a date. So I think he is not a usual political head of state. It is a state that sponsored terror, that is designed as a sponsored terror in many countries. And I think it is a different, we cannot call him just a political head of a state. He's the head of a terror state, a terror organization, and without him, things would not develop the way they developed. So I think morally, no question.
Okay, and just to wrap up, Seema, I suppose, what would you say to those people who would make the point that Israel has made the region more dangerous? What would you say to that criticism?
I don't think Israel has made the region more dangerous. I think, and you can see what Iran is doing now with the Gulf states. I assume you have mentioned what happened in Cyprus with the British base. So this is not a state. Iran was never a state that was thinking only about its own borders and its own people. From the beginning of the revolution, they have been talking about export of the revolution outside of the borders of Iran. And therefore, it's not a case of, it's not Israel that made the region jeopardize the situation in the region and the instability. It's Iran that has not only now has attacked Saudi Arabia, Aramco facilities. In 2019, it was just out of the blue. There was no crisis between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and they decided to attack and to strike the Aramco facilities, which they did yesterday as well. So it's not Israel that made it a regional problem. It's Iran that made it a regional problem.
Thank you for talking to us, Seema. We appreciate your insight there. Seema Shine there, Senior Researcher, former Director of Iran and the Shia Axis Research Program at the Institute for National Security Studies, also part of the Mossad between 2003 and 2007, giving us her insights there. Let's take you live now to Vienna and the International Atomic Energy Agency Chief, Rafael Grossi.
My hope is also, and I think praise is due to the strenuous efforts by the Foreign Minister of Oman and his team there that were trying to bring the two sides together. I was grateful to him for hosting us also in Geneva, and we hope that this process, or a diplomatic process in general, shall resume. It must.
Okay, thanks for taking my questions. Good afternoon, Mr. Director General.
Hello.
I'm a journalist of the CCTV, China Media Group.
Yes.
So at a time when technical engagement between the United States and Iran was expected to move forward, and the renewed military strikes have taken place, and do you believe these actions undermine the trust or narrow the space for negotiations? How prepared is the agency IAEA to operate under this kind of conditions? Thank you.
Well, the agency is always prepared. We have all the necessary information about, of course, the nuclear program. We also have the expertise to determine how, as I was telling our Austrian colleague just now, to determine and help negotiators look at the feasibility of some of the things they propose. It's up to them to agree or to disagree on them. So we are absolutely ready. My hope, as I just said, is that we will be back at the negotiating table sooner rather than later. It is obvious that after this military conflict ends, and we all hope that this will be very, very soon, we will still need to have a long, durable solution which will provide a sense of predictability, a sense of certainty for Iran and neighboring countries. So I think that is very important, and the agency has, in my view, an indispensable role to play in that process.
We have a question here.
Hello, DJ.
Hello.
Nippon TV.
Yes.
Setsuko Inaki. I would like to ask you about the imminency of this attack, because the U.S. reason was that it was imminent. There was an imminent danger for to rationalize this attack, and you were actually in the negotiation in the technical part.
Yeah.
Did you have the sense that the danger was imminent?
Well, this is not for me to determine, really. When a country, and I also, let me refer again to what I said this morning to the Board of Governors, the use of force, which we, of course, do not want to see in general in international relations, is a fact of life. This occurs. And those deciding to do that based it on their assumptions, which are not for me to validate or invalidate. So what I can say is that our assessment of what the situation was and is when it comes to the Iranian nuclear program is very clear and has been in my reports throughout. So this is my evaluation. It's an evaluation that is based on the fact that Iran has a very big, ambitious nuclear program, that we do not have the accesses that we should have. At the same time, I said it last year, before the June 12-day war, we don't see a structured program to manufacture nuclear weapons. So that is the assessment of the agency. Then, of course, countries have either other information or political considerations, which are not for me to validate, as I said, or invalidate.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Hi, DG. Jonathan Tyrone, Bloomberg
Hello,
News.
Jonathan. Hello.
You met the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. On Friday. The U.S. administration has transmitted a letter to Congress that permits Saudi Arabia to have access to enrichment technology, and also plans to establish a bilateral safeguards agreement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia that potentially makes the IAEA safeguards program subsidiary. Can you give us a readout on how you see that proposal being floated by the Trump administration in Saudi Arabia?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be reminded that this is a bilateral agreement. So it's an agreement between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United States. The terms of that agreement is for them to decide. We always, as a rule, support and advise on having for any agreement the highest, best possible standards of safeguards and verification. And there are many ways to do that. As you know, Argentina and Brazil had its own way to do it. Other countries do it in different ways. So we will, and of course, when they come to that agreement, which is not the case so far, so there is a little bit of speculation as to what are the exact contents of that agreement. When that happens, what we expect, and we're sure that this will happen, I have been discussing with Secretary Wright, for example, in Washington and in other parts, they are going to be requesting the agency to verify that agreement. So I would say, from the perspective of the IAEA, we are in a listening mode. We advise, of course, because this process has been ongoing, and if you remember, it goes back to the Biden administration as well. It's been a process that has taken a long time, with different emphasis as time passes and the priorities of each government changes. So we will be ready to apply the verification measures that they.
But just a quick follow-up.
Yes.
But just broadly, What does it say about safeguards that there's a force concentrated in the Middle East to wage war on one country over its nuclear fuel cycle program? At the same time, letters are being transmitted that would open up the fuel cycle to a neighboring country.
Well, a nuclear fuel cycle is a very legitimate thing to begin with. And for this
speaking there is Rafael Grossi, head of the International Agency for Atomic Energy, the UN's nuclear watchdog, speaking in Vienna after Iranian authorities said that Natanz nuclear site in Iran had been hit. We'll have more on that coming up.
What we hope is that the parties to the agreement.
Oil prices rise sharply as fears escalate of a prolonged conflict with Iran hanging over the world's most important oil-producing region. Shares in Asia fall sharply, and there's a sell-off in Europe too as investors brace themselves for the potential impact of a war in the Middle East. And travel in turmoil with flights grounded throughout Middle Eastern hubs. Analysts say it's the biggest disruption to global aviation since COVID. Hello there, welcome to Business Today. I'm Ty Enright. Global oil prices have risen sharply in response to the escalating conflict in the Middle East. Brent crude, which is the global benchmark for oil prices, jumped by some 10% to touch more than $82 a barrel on Monday before easing after at least 3 ships were attacked near the Strait of Hormuz over the weekend. Right now, the market price of Brent crude is just over $78 per barrel, although it's not closed the Strait of Hormuz yet. Iran has warned vessels not to pass through it. It is a crucial waterway to the south of the country, through which around 20% of the world's oil and gas is shipped. We'll have more on the latest market movements in relation to oil in just a minute. But first, let's delve in more into the effect that this conflict is having on shipping in that Strait of Hormuz. Maersk, which is the world's biggest container shipping company, has announced it's rerouting ships around the Cape of Good Hope. Meanwhile, insurers have been telling ship owners that they would cancel policies and raise coverage prices for vessels traveling through the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Shipping analyst Peter Sand told us earlier this all adds up to significant disruption for the industry.
We basically see all the expected knee-jerk reactions across the board, including that from insurance companies that have basically kept shipping away, not only from Red Sea transits in the past 2 years, but of course also into through the Strait of Hormuz into the Arabian Gulf right now. So that's of course also prompting many carriers, container shipping owners and operators to stay clear of the transit. Massive disruption to those supply chains that are connected via the Arabian Gulf. Many great container lines do transits the Strait of Hormuz going into Jebel Ali before carrying on. But for the time being, it's local, it's regional, but of course also global, with the Houthis now also threatening to increase their attacks on shipping in Bab el-Mandeb, the southern part of Red Sea. So freight costs are rising. Businesses are not connected. Areas do no longer accept bookings into the Middle East region. So a massive disruption and weaponization of international trade.
Well, what about the stock markets? How are investors reacting? Stock market indices in Asia saw sharp falls at the start of their trading week. Japan's Nikkei closed 1.35% lower. Hong Kong's Hang Seng shed more than 2%. Airlines particularly hardly hit, with Qantas, Japan Airlines and Cathay Pacific shares all down by more than 5%. European indices are also trading lower across the board. I can give you the latest prices there. The FTSE 100 in London down by 0.9%. The DAX in Frankfurt down by almost 1.9%. The CAC in Paris down by 1.7%. And as we look ahead to trading in the United States, where Wall Street futures are also pointing towards the negative. Kathleen Brooks is a research director at the trading platform XTB and joins me now. Thanks for being with us, Kathleen. take us into the minds of investors, explain the ripple effects that they are worried about.
Yeah, I mean, financial markets have definitely had a jolt from this event, even though there was quite a big build-up. The actual scale of it and the retaliation across the Middle East was quite unexpected, and I think we are seeing that play out. But I think, Ty, if you told me a couple of years ago, 5 years ago maybe, that the oil price would have risen by 7% when the US and Iran are technically at war with each other, I would have probably expected something much bigger, and I would have maybe expected triple-digit oil. But it just goes to show that the landscape is very different now. The US is the world's biggest oil producer, so there are a broader supply base. So that has a knock-on impact to stocks. So yes, stocks are lower, but they've been disrupted by multiple things this year. The Sell America trade, fears about AI, credit risks as well. This is something else, obviously, to add to that. But I think a rough 2% decline for US and European equities is quite moderate at this stage, even though certain stocks, obviously like the airlines, holiday companies, they are really taking a hit today.
The FTSE 100 not affected as badly, and I know that you believe it could actually be sort of insulated to this turmoil. What more can you tell us about that?
Yes, I mean, this is almost the perfect environment for the FTSE 100. It's very heavy on oil stocks, on miners and materials, because the gold price has also rallied today, and also defense stocks. So those big names, Rolls-Royce, you've got BAE Systems, they're all going to be in demand, and that really plays into it. We've also got a very small tech sector, so we're less impacted by that AI disruption trade. So I think that whilst we want a swift conclusion to this, the FTSE 100 has been making, multiple record highs this year already. And I think that, once the dust has settled on the initial stages of this conflict, we could potentially see more record highs for the FTSE 100 and life above that 11,000 level.
Okay, Kathleen Brooks from XTB, thank you very much for joining us with those thoughts. Let's talk more about the oil market now. Let's explore the latest price changes with Carol Nackley, Chief Executive of Crystal Energy. Thank you very much for being with us today. The price gone up in the region of 7%. Put it all into context for us. How bad is it, and could it have been a lot worse?
Well, definitely it could have been a lot worse, but the increase in prices, we already start to see them as soon as we start hearing about the military buildup of the Americans in the Middle East, which was the biggest, if I'm not mistaken, since the war in Iraq. And that the market started to feel nervous about, and we saw prices creeping up gradually higher and higher. But definitely when the markets opened this morning, we saw a much bigger increase in prices. That said, given the severity of the situation, and involving the trade of oil and gas from the Strait of Hormuz, and in some instances we already start to see some attacks on energy infrastructure. To see oil prices where they are today is not really a terrible scenario from a consumer's perspective, because if the same crisis would have happened in the 70s and 80s, I bet you prices would have jumped immediately to above $100 a barrel, and we are far from that level.
Yeah, interesting. And we know also that the production cartel OPEC has raised production only slightly. Could it do more? I know also the International Energy Agency is also talking to oil and gas producers about our response. Could a boost in production help to keep prices in check?
Absolutely. I don't want to downplay the severity of the situation in the Middle East at the moment, but the good news is that there's plenty of oil around. So we started the year with expectation there will be more oil than there will be demand for it this year, what we call market surplus. But definitely every additional barrel from OPEC Plus helps. That said, there is still a lot of spare capacity that the Saudis and the UAE and the Kuwaitis are sitting on. How they can get to the market in the middle of the war, I'm not quite sure, but the Americans are producing a lot of oil, and the IEA still have what we call strategic petroleum reserves that can be also released in the market should we see a sustained disruption to supply and continued upward pressure on prices. So we're not in a terrible crisis yet, but it's unfortunate what's happening in the Middle East.
There's oil prices as a side effect to this crisis, as it were, but then there's also the potential, isn't there, for Iran to use our propensity to use oil as a weapon of sorts, as they try and strangle supply. What risk do you see there?
Oh, definitely. The Iranians have mainly used oil as a political weapon and the threats to close the Straits of Hormuz, because that is their main leverage when it comes to threatening the stability of the region and the global economy, because the Strait of Hormuz, you have almost 25% of global oil going through there, 20% of global liquefied natural gas going through there. So any disruptions in that part of the world will put upward pressure on prices, but also Iran will suffer as well, because Iran is still sending a sanctioned oil through the Straits of Hormuz to China, and it relies heavily on that strait. So it's not just other players that will suffer, but the Iranian economy will suffer even more.
Okay, so
Carol Knackle from
Iran's
Crystal Energy,
main
thank you very
business
much for sharing your
partner
thoughts with us
is
today.
Russia.
We're
Got
staying
it.
on the subject of oil, but also airlines continuing to cancel and divert flights in the Middle East in what's been described as the biggest disruption to global aviation since the COVID pandemic. Flights in and out of airports in Tel Aviv, Dubai, Doha, and other international hubs in the region have been suspended. The UK Foreign Office is warning British citizens against all but essential travel to Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE. Those already there have been advised to shelter. British government officials are understood to be making plans to potentially evacuate UK nationals. So joining me now is the airline analyst, John Strickland, director at JLS Consulting. John, thanks for being with us. So much air traffic passes through those big Middle Eastern hubs, Doha, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, stopping off on trips going all over the world. Is this essentially going to be put on halt until missiles stop flying overhead?
You're absolutely right. I mean, these Gulf hubs have become an essential anchor point, really pivotal to 21st century aviation, not least to east-west flows between Europe and Australasia. We're talking about typically 500,000 passengers a day go through those airports, and there's not really any alternative or very limited capacity elsewhere these days to some of the routings that people take. And of course, the airlines in question, particularly Emirates and Qatar, have aircraft not only grounded in their hubs, but scattered around the world with crews now out of place and passengers not knowing when that can be addressed.
There's short-term disruption, obviously, but what about the potential for long-term disruption? If this doesn't happen soon, what can the industry do to recalibrate itself and perhaps avoid this airspace for the medium term?
Yeah.
Well, a number of airlines flying, particularly on these east-west routings, including going through to Asia, have been having to use more Middle Eastern airspace in recent times post the Ukraine crisis with the inability to fly over Siberia. So the options are even more limited. As you said there, maybe the British government's looking to assist some passengers to move them, but when the airports are closed and airspace is off limits, then very little can happen. I think there will be a recalibration once we get through, hopefully sooner than later, all this military activity and things calm down. I don't see these hubs in any way being damaged in terms of the role they play in aviation or indeed in the attractiveness of parts of the region, particularly, for example, Dubai, from a tourism point of view. But that's somewhere down the line at an unpredictable time at the moment.
One really quickly, John, is this a situation where disrupted passengers can get compensation?
I think it's extremely unlikely, and even insurance policies for much travel don't tend to cover war risks, so there's a very high exposure. Having said that, at least we hear in the UAE, the country is footing hotel bills for people stuck there. Airlines will certainly do their best to move people and make absolute flexibility in the arrangements for changing tickets, whatever price customers have paid.
Okay. John Strickland, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Do stay with us here on BBC News for more updates on the market reaction to all the latest developments in the Middle East. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
There is now a new front in a conflict that is spreading across the Middle East. Israel is carrying out a wide-ranging air assault against the Iran-backed militia group Hezbollah in Lebanon. Well, this comes after the militia group fired missiles at Israel to avenge the killing of Iran's supreme leader. In a statement, the IDF accused the militant group of acting on behalf of Iran and targeting Israeli civilians. It said it would act against the group's decision to join the the campaign. Well, Israeli forces have issued evacuation orders for more than 50 towns and villages across Lebanon. Lines of traffic have formed in Beirut as people have been attempting to leave the city since the early hours of this morning. Well, all this comes as the US-Israeli war with Iran enters its third day, with all sides launching large-scale airstrikes. This morning, there have been reports of blasts in other parts of the Middle East. In just the past hour, there have been reports that smoke has been seen rising from the US Embassy in Kuwait. Explosions have also been heard in Abu Dhabi and earlier on Monday in Bahrain, Doha and Dubai. And in just the last hour, sirens and explosions were heard in Jerusalem. This comes a day after Iranian missiles struck the Israeli city of Beit Shemesh, killing at least 9 people. While speaking late on Sunday, Donald Trump said combat operations against Iran would continue until all our objectives were achieved. He warned that there would likely be more American casualties after the Pentagon confirmed that 3 U.S. service members had been killed in action.
That's all they got for right now. I'll try to come back later. If they have more. Only thing I can say is, the shit's crazy, bro. It is, unfortunately, it's crazy. And for right now, it is what it is. There's no other way to put it. Good morning. Like, share, subscribe. Peace.